Hello. You've joined the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Boards for the CSB's public business meeting. We will now begin this meeting with board member Dr. Sylvia Johnson.
Thank you, Brian, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our first quarterly board meeting of the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Our chairperson, Steve Owens, cannot be with us today and has formally delegated me to chair today's meeting. FY23 was busy for us here at the CSB. The hard work and dedication of the staff paid off, and we closed 10 investigative reports, the most in the history of the agency in a fiscal year, and we closed 12 reports during the calendar year. We now have just 5 reports left in the backlog, and we're on track to complete those by the end of the 2023 calendar year. Our investigations team is also working diligently to conclude the investigation into the fatal explosion at the BP Toledo refinery in Oregon, Ohio, that took the lives of Ben and Max Morrissey in September of 2022. In addition to all the work the staff has done to close a record number of investigative reports, the CSB has also been busy hiring. In FY23, we got an additional board member and hired 10 new staff members. Specifically, we hired 4 new chemical incident investigators and 1 supervisory chemical incident investigator, 2 additional staff and recommendations, 2 in contracting, 1 in finance, and a deputy CIO. We've also reinstated our Pathways program, which you will hear more about in just a few minutes. As part of our ongoing commitment to stakeholder engagement, the board met with the United Steelworkers Health, Safety, and Environment Leadership Team to hear about the work they're doing and to discuss ways in which the CSB and USW can mutually improve and ensure a safe working environment for all workers. The CSB appreciates our longstanding relationship with USW, and we very much look forward to our continued work together and our shared vision of safer workplaces. Earlier this month, I had the pleasure of presenting at the National Association of Sarah Title III Program Officials, or NASPO's mid-year meeting in Houston, Texas. NASPO is another important CSB stakeholder. Their members are the staff of state emergency response commissions, tribal emergency response commissions, local emergency planning committees, various federal agencies, and private industry, all of whom play an integral role in the work we do at the CSB. At the NASPO meeting, I provided an overview of the work we continue to do to rebuild and revitalize this agency. The meeting provided an excellent opportunity for the CSB to engage with yet another key stakeholders. To our new CSB staff, welcome. I'm thrilled that you chose to become a part of our amazing team of dedicated public servants who work tirelessly to protect the health and safety of workers, communities, and the public. It's an exciting time to be at the CSB, and I continue to be optimistic about the future of this agency. Before I turn the meeting over to board member Sandoval, there are a couple of housekeeping reminders. At the end of today's meeting, we will open the line for comments. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and use the icon on your screen to raise your hand. If you have a question, please submit your question to public@csb.gov. Again, welcome to the meeting, and now to you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. Really appreciate it. Thank you for welcoming us. And I wanted to also underscore what Dr. Johnson was saying, that the CSB has been very busy and successful with issuing investigative reports that include important recommendations to improve public safety and environmental safety. So we'll hear more about recommendations shortly in the presentation to follow. We also issued a number of safety alerts, as I'll discuss in more detail with regard to the alert about preparations for hurricanes and other extreme weather. And also wanted to echo the welcome to our new staff, as well as thank you to our existing staff who worked extremely hard this year, had a very, very productive year, and worked really hard to also close out the end of the year with the highest level of productivity and also excellent fiscal and personnel and other management. So thank you to everyone for all the work you're doing. And also thank you to all of our partners. We also met, the CSB also met with CISA, the cybersecurity agency, to get a cybersecurity briefing to talk about cybersecurity both at our agency and to begin a dialogue about cybersecurity in the chemical and petrochemical industry. So an important issue, especially as we consider global affairs. I also had the opportunity to meet with CARE, Community Awareness Emergency Response, and was accompanied by our investigator, Melike Yersas, also by Don Nixon, investigator, and Shauna Lawhorn. So appreciated the opportunity to talk to the community of Martinez, California, and Contra Costa County, where many refineries are located, about the CSB's work. And I soon will be going next week to speak with the United Steelworkers Contra Costa County chapter, and am looking forward to that dialogue. So I mentioned safety alerts, and so just wanted to also remind chemical safety operators and of course communities where they're located. The CSB has issued a news release urging chemical companies to prepare for a harsh hurricane season. And hurricane season continues through November. So just yesterday, Hurricane Otis, or Otis, as it would be called in Spanish, hit Acapulco as a Category 5 hurricane. It wasn't predicted to be a hurricane of that magnitude, but came on with vengeance. So we're seeing really extreme weather, and in fact, an El Nino weather pattern is predicted for this coming winter, which would augur more rain and more flooding. So it just emphasizes the need to be alert in the chemical safety and petrochemical safety area, and to coordinate with communities. So we look forward to working together to protect safety, as our nation also thinks about and mourns the events in Lewiston, Maine. I know the president has ordered flags at half staff today at federal buildings. So if the sympathies go out to the people in Lewiston, Maine, and all of the people of Maine, and all the people affected by violence, while we at the same time keep an eye on chemical and public safety. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy, for those remarks. I will now turn the meeting over to our Executive Director of Investigations and Recommendations, Steve Kleist, for his remarks and update. Executive Director Kleist.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Johnson mentioned in her opening remarks, the Office of Investigations is working diligently to close the 5 remaining investigations that fall into the category of our legacy investigations that date back to 2017. Before the end of this calendar year, we will be completing the Didion Milling report. Incident took place in Cambria, Wisconsin. The Chemco incident that took place in Crosby, Texas in 2019. The Wedland 1H well release incident that took place in 2020. The Foundation Food Group release event that took place in Gainesville, Georgia in 2021. And also the Yankton Majestic event that took place in Columbus, Ohio in 2021. With the closure of those investigations, we will have erased the backlog that we have as an agency have been working very diligently to address. And as Dr. Johnson also mentioned, the implementation of the Office of Investigations Human Capital Plan has been going very well. We had a very aggressive approach to implementation of the Human Capital Plan, and the remaining 3 positions that we're looking to fill under the Pathways Recent Graduate Program has been very successful. 3 offers were extended. We currently have one of the 3 chemical engineer positions filled, and that person is on board. During the week of November 5th, we have the 2nd chemical engineer joining the CSB team, and the 3rd will be joining the agency before the end of this calendar year. So again, we're increasing our investigative capacity, and that will enable us to address additional safety issues and concerns as they arise in the upcoming years. So we thank the board for their support in enabling us to bring to closure these investigations, as well as implementing our human capital plan to give us that investigative capacity that we very much need. At this point, I will turn the presentation over to our Director of Recommendations, Chuck Barbie, and he will give us a presentation on the major events that have taken place during the fiscal year 23 in his area of responsibility. So Chuck, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Steve. Very excited about the opportunity to talk about our agency successes in fiscal year 23, as well as to highlight a couple of recommendations that have been closed since the last public meeting. And then lastly, to talk about actions taken by recommendation recipients in both fiscal year 23 and 24. So with that, let's get into the presentation. Okay, first, I'll give you an overview about what I'm going to talk about. I would be remiss in talking about recommendations without talking about investigations, and then talking about the support that is necessary to execute our mission. So in order to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the CSB to put things in perspective, our mission, and then I'll roll into recommendation statistics, and we'll talk about those highlighted recommendations, and then finish up with recommendation recipient action. So the CSB is a micro agency, and for those of you that don't know, that word is exactly what it implies. We have less than 100 people, and it's an approximation, and it's hard to actually nail down for me how many people we have because we're constantly hiring right now. But we will say we've got approximately 40 people, and it's under the leadership of a board that sets our strategic direction, and then they have a chairman and CEO that oversees it. So keep that in mind, approximately 40 people. In addition to what we do, we are a federal government agency and all that goes along with that. Now you'd think that, maybe they cut us a break because we only have 40 people, but we have the same federal government agency requirements as every other agencies with thousands and thousands of people. We have to do those same things. And those kinds of things include like submitting budgets to Congress, OMB, OIG audits, mandatory government-wide training, hiring and interviewing job applicants, and internal stuff like performance ratings. We do these annually, and then we do performance reviews, and then we do performance plans for the next cycle. So we have all these things that we do because we are a federal government agency, including doing our job. And of course, the requirements of our job come from our statutory authority, and loosely that is that we are an independent federal agency charged with investigating, determining, and reporting to the public in writing the facts, conditions, and circumstances, and the cause or probable cause of any accidental chemical release resulting in a fatality, serious injury, or substantial property damages. Now, to do that job, as our authority says, we have our mission, and our mission is to drive chemical safety excellence through independent investigations to protect communities, workers, and the environment. So that mission, we have mission support and mission execution, as well as the communication of that mission. So from the mission support side, and I like to call these folks our unsung heroes, you're not going to see them out in the field doing the work, and you probably won't know who they are. But let me say, the mission doesn't happen without mission support. And these groups are like board affairs. For those of you who don't know, I like to say board affairs takes care of the care and feeding of the board. What that means is they take care of their administrative needs, their travel needs, those kinds of things. Then we've got the Office of General Counsel. They provide legal advice to the chairman, as well as legal review to a lot of the things that we do internally. And their job is to make sure that we don't exceed our authority and jurisdiction, and also to make sure that we get the most out of our authority and jurisdiction and keep us out of trouble. And then our Office of Administration. These are the workhorses of mission support. And they have various offices that handle things under that office, such as contract, When we go out to the field, we need things like to make sure that the structures are safe, that the air is breathable. Sometimes we need metallurgical analysis, these kinds of things. With our 40 people, we don't do these things ourselves. We typically contract that kind of thing out. We've got financial operations. They manage our budget. They submit our budget request, our budget proposal. They make sure that we are staying within our budget, and they make sure that the money that we're using comes from the appropriate accounts, things like that. Human resources, as you've heard, we've been hiring. They oversee the hiring process. So they make sure we get those resources in. And once we've got them, well, then we've got to take care of them. So we've got to make sure people are getting paid. We've got to make sure their benefits and their medical are established and working as they're supposed to, and things like that. And then last, information technology. As you know, we're talking through a Zoom meeting. Our IT folks oversee that, as well as making sure we have the computers that we're talking through, our cell phones, various applications that we need to do our job. So those are the kinds of things that are handled in mission support and are critical to executing the mission. So those are unsung heroes. Now we're going to go to government and public affairs. Now, interesting enough, I didn't put them under the mission support side, and I'm not putting them under the mission execution side. They sort of float in between those. They do our outreach, and they communicate with our congressional staff members and that kind of thing, as well as with the media. But they are the folks that put our safety message out there. And then everybody's heard of our award-winning CSB safety videos. With this is the group that oversees that entire process and makes sure that they're so successful. And then finally, I'm going to roll into the mission execution piece. That's the Office of Investigations and Recommendations. This is the bread and butter of mission execution. These are the folks that, when they get the call, they go out into the field, regardless of what they're doing. They head to an accident site. Accident sites, I don't know if anybody's ever been to one, but they're not the greatest places to go. Typically, you're talking to people that have experienced the worst day of their life, and their job is to go in and get all the pertinent information that they need to determine the cause. And sometimes it takes several weeks and multiple visit returns and that kind of thing. And then they get down into writing the report. And then that's where the first touch point that the Office of Recommendations has with this group, is we start helping with recommendation development as a part of that report. And then eventually, once the report is released, and we track and advocate for recommendation implementation. And that's how all the sausage is made. So you have to have mission support, mission execution, and you have to communicate that mission so that people know what we are doing. Now, as a result of all of our people supporting and executing the mission, next slide. This year, as Dr. Johnson said, we have put out, approved and released 10 investigations. When you look again, we've got 40 people, and not all 40 of those people are in investigations and recommendations drafting report. It's a much smaller portion of that. So 10 reports in fiscal year 23 is astronomical. And then with each of those reports comes recommendations. PES had 5, TPC 5, Carrari 12, Husky 16, Biolab 6, Lyondell 6, Bacher 10, Watson 2, Optimabel 15, and ITC 8. And at the end of the day, what does that all come down to? 85 life-saving safety recommendations issued in fiscal year 23. Now, to put that number in perspective, if you look at fiscal year 22, at the end of that year, we had 87 open recommendations. Well, this past fiscal year, we issued 85. We doubled the amount of recommendations that we were out there trying to implement to drive that chemical safety. So fiscal year 22, we had a total of 869 recommendations. And as I said, 87 of which were open, 782 closed. At the end of fiscal year 23, we now have 954 recommendations. We're rapidly approaching that 1,000 recommendation milestone, which, that's looking forward to it. Right now, 147 of those are open, 807 are closed. Now we're going to talk about just recommendation action in fiscal year 23. So as I said, we issued 85. We advanced 7. And what does advanced mean? That means we didn't close them, but the recommendation recipient provided a response. And as a result, they either did everything we asked and we just needed a little bit more, or they told us they were going to implement it and they gave us a plan and they gave us a timeline. Or in some cases, they either told us they weren't going to, they didn't have a plan that would really implement that recommendation, or they just didn't communicate back. And then it becomes open unacceptable. So you got open acceptable or open unacceptable. That is what advanced means. And then lastly, we have 26 closed recommendations this past year. So we issued 85 and we closed 26. So me and my staff, we are working as hard as we can to keep up with that closure rate. Now, specific to recommendation action taken since the last public meeting, I'm going to talk about recommendations from 2 reports. The TPC Port Neches Explosion and Fire Report, we're going to talk about R2 and R3 to TPC. And the Curare Pasadena Release and Fire, we're going to talk about R2, R6, and R9 to Curare. And I'll talk about why I selected these particular recommendation recipients and their recommendations once we get towards the end. But for now, let's roll right into it. On the morning of November 27, 2019, a piping dead leg leading to an offline pump in the TPC Group Port Neches Operations Facility butadiene unit ruptured. It released approximately 6,000 gallons of liquid butadiene, which vaporized, found a heat source, and had multiple and massive fires and explosions. The TPC, there were TPC Group employees, there were 2 of them that were injured, as well as a security contractor. And there were 5 additional injuries suffered by residents in the surrounding community. As a result of the incident, it was declared a state of disaster. There were multiple shelter in place and evacuation orders given, and those evacuations were out a 4-mile radius out. There was $450 million of on-site damage and approximately $153 million of off-site property damage in the surrounding area outside the facility. As a result of the incident, the CSB issued 3 recommendations to TPC, all of which they've been responsive on. We're going to talk about the 2 that have been closed, and that's R2 and R3. So recommendation R2, we asked we asked thank you. We asked TPC to passivate all their storage vessels, fixed equipment, and associated piping systems in high purity betadine service, consistent with industry good practice guidance. Okay. And then what did they do to implement it? They did exactly what we asked them to do. And for those of you who don't know what passivation is, that is the coating of these things to prevent polymerization or fouling, or that popcorn polymer buildup that actually expanded and caused that rupture in the dead leg piping. So they did exactly what we asked them to do, and then they implemented a policy to make sure that when they have to renew that passivation, they can do that, as well as any new equipment that comes in. Now, as a result of their actions, the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action. We also asked them to incorporate the record keeping of any paper-based process performance information into their existing electronic records management system. When you've got a paper-based system and you've got a massive fire and explosions, that paper doesn't last too long. So this is really about the record keeping and their ability to go back and find the information that they might need to either help process improvement on their side of the house, or for us to better able to figure out what happened should something happen again, which, hopefully that doesn't. What did they do? They implemented that record keeping system, and they issued associated policy to make sure that additional information was appropriately captured in that system. So as a result of their actions, the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action also. All right, now we're going to talk about the Carrari Pasadena release and fire. On the morning of May 19th, 2018, a pressure relief device of a reactor used to make ethylene and vinyl alcohol copolymer, which Carrari calls eval, activated and discharged approximately 2,000 pounds of ethylene into the air through a horizontally oriented discharge piping. The resulting vapor cloud found a heat source and then ignited. Several workers sustained injuries. 21 of those were transported off-site to medical facilities for treatment, and additionally, 2 others were life-flighted from the Carrari facility. As a result of this incident, the CSB issued 12 recommendations to Carrari, and Carrari has also been very, very responsive. We're going to talk about 3 that were recently closed. I'm going to start with recommendation R2. And that was to implement a site-wide system to evacuate non-essential personnel during upset conditions and to exclude non-essential workers from being near equipment during transient operating modes such as startup. And what did Carrari do to implement this? They did exactly what we asked them to do, and they updated their policy and procedures to reflect these actions to make sure that they continue to do them. As a result of their actions, the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action. R6 to Carrari was to clarify the lower equipment design pressure of the eval reactor 2 within the operator training systems, written procedures, and the control system interface. And in short, they did, again, exactly what we asked them to do. They provided all the necessary paperwork to show their standard operating procedures had changed, their control system interface, and then they associated training material with that lower equipment design pressure of eval reactor 2. So the board voted to close this recommendation with acceptable action. And lastly, R9 to Carrari. We asked them to, they had already started working on it. So we asked them to complete their alarm management efforts at the plant and implement a continual program to meet the performance targets of the ISA 18.2 standard. And they did. Like I say, they were already in the process of doing it. So when they received this recommendation, it became something that they could very easily implement, and they did. They finished everything up. And the program includes regular and consistent monitoring as well as improvement processes. So based on their actions, the board voted to close this recommendation, acceptable action also. Now, the reason I highlighted TPC and Carrari is because of their responsive. They've been communicating with us pretty regularly, and they've been taking action. And that's what the implementation of safety recommendation requires: communication and action. We've active communication with recommendation recipients. We'll start with our primary stakeholders: EPA, OSHA, API, NFPA, and ICC. We communicate with them from the Office of Recommendations at least monthly, if not more. And that's been growing over the years. Things have gotten better and better and better. And then other recommendation recipients. And these are reports that we have just issued, which is why this is particularly good. So TPC, Carrari, ITC, Optimabel, Wacker, LyondellBasell, MBBI, and NCBI. All of these groups have been very communicative with us, and they have been making sure that the actions that they're taking meet the gaps that we found in our investigation reports. We're particularly excited about the NBBI, the National Board of Boiler and Pressure Vessel Inspectors. Working with them, they've been very, very interested in what we found and how they can make things safer. And then, of course, the National Center for Biotechnology Information. They have information that they put out for folks to review, PubChem being one of those, and they were also very interested in how we were interested in updating some of that material. Now, why did I say all this? Well, I wanted to basically reflect that for fiscal year 23 and 24, recommendation recipient action has been just phenomenal. It's been great. We're never looking for work. They have provided us a tremendous amount. And I also want to say, keep up that great work. As you know, as together, we're driving chemical safety excellence to protect those communities, workers, and the environment. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present this material. And with that, I am going to pass it back to you, Dr. Johnson.
Okay, thank you, Chuck and Steve, for those phenomenal updates. I want to thank both of you for your leadership. Steve, I want to thank you for your leadership, which has gotten us 2/3 of the way through the agency's longstanding backlog. And as Chuck said, all of this takes the effort of the entire team. So thank you to the entire CSB team as well. But Chuck, I also want to thank you for your leadership, because as you stated, we're a small but mighty agency, and our recommendations are life-saving tools that we have at our disposal. And so I know that our stakeholders take these recommendations seriously. And so thank you for highlighting some of the things that have been done in 23 and already in 2024. It's very much appreciated, and I can't express enough. And also support what you're saying about the work and the successes at the CSB would not be possible without our entire team. And so I echo that sentiment, and I think I can speak for the entire board on that score. And so now what I want to do is open the meeting for public comments. As a reminder, we would ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and use the icon on your screen to raise your hand. Remember, if you have a question, you will submit your question to public@csb.gov. So back to you, Brian.
Yeah, so if anyone would like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand function. I'd be glad to acknowledge you to the floor, and you'll have an opportunity to make a comment. I'm keeping an eye on the list of give it another 30 seconds for anyone to have an opportunity to leave a comment. Again, use the raise your hand function. I'd be glad to acknowledge you to the floor. Sylvia? I don't have any takers on the comment opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. And again, I want to thank the entire CSB team for all of their work. And FY23 was a banner year for us, and we're going to continue focusing on rebuilding and revitalizing the CSB. And as we do that, our staff continues to lead the way. I really appreciate, again, all that this team has done and will continue to do to advance the mission of the agency. As Chuck pointed out, we've issued a record number of recommendations to stakeholders. We've advanced and closed several more. Our investigations team has gotten us almost to the end of the agency's backlog. And so we want to reassure the public, communities, workers, that we are a strong agency, and excited about the future of the CSB. And as a reminder, we have these meetings quarterly, and our next quarterly meeting is on Thursday, January 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I hope you all will join us. Thank you for your continued support and for joining us today.
Thank you.